Chapter 4. Aunt Mattie had come down from the farm to do some shopping for the household up there. Aunt Mattie was Evelyn's father's aunt. Her full name was Matilda, and she was the person for whom both Aunt Hilda and Matilda the doll had been named. Last Christmas, she had given the doll Matilda to Evelyn as a present. It was Aunt Mattie and her sister Aunt Charlotte with whom Evelyn's father had spent all his vacations after his mother remarried and went abroad for some years. Evelyn's father had always felt that the home of Aunt Charlotte and Aunt Mattie was truly home. Aunt Charlotte was a gentle, motherly soul, and when her son Henry and his wife died, she took their children back to the farm where her sister Mattie had always spent her summers. And now, they both lived there all year round. Aunt Mattie was extremely efficient. She could do all sorts of useful things, from every kind of cooking, preserving, and sewing to housework, knitting, and more. It was as good for a house to have a visit from Aunt Mattie as it was to have a full spring cleaning, and as good for the people in the house as taking a strong spring tonic. Aunt Mattie always knew the best way of doing everything, or so she believed, and she did not like new ways. She was quite sure she knew better about all sorts of things than her nephew's wife did. But there was one thing she did admit Mrs. West knew more about: children's clothes. "Not that it matters very much," she said to Mrs. West, "for we live so out of the world. But Evelyn has such pretty clothes, and I should like the benefit of your taste." So Evelyn's mother and Aunt Mattie went shopping together one morning. Mrs. West always found it difficult to shop with Aunt Mattie, because they never liked the same things. And when Aunt Mattie would say, "Oh, what a pretty gingham! Don't you think it's a beauty?" it felt rude to reply, "No, I don't," again and again. Mrs. West was a very polite person, and she was always afraid of hurting Aunt Mattie's feelings. But she couldn't help inwardly sighing at the thought of her little cousins dressed in dull, old-fashioned clothes that Aunt Mattie thought were just fine. Aunt Mattie was looking for plaid ginghams in bright colors to please the children, well-covered ones, so they wouldn't show the dirt. But Mrs. West thought all the plaids were hideous. She finally persuaded Aunt Mattie to get some plain blue chambray for one child and pink for the other. "They will not be at all useful," said Aunt Mattie doubtfully. "Nothing is really serviceable unless you're willing to put the children into rompers," said Mrs. West, "and of course Lottie is too old for that. Indeed, no niece of mine is ever going to wear trousers like boys," said Aunt Mattie firmly. "I may be mid-Victorian, as James says, but at least Lottie and Prue will never be taken for boys. Oh, there is a beautiful plaid over there. I do like a mixture of colors. How much is that a yard?" Fortunately, it was too expensive, and Mrs. West suggested that perhaps they could find something ready-made for Lottie and Prue. The ready-made frocks for children were, many of them, shapely and most of them pretty. Mrs. West felt that she could not go far wrong. They bought attractive ones for both Lottie and Prue and were just leaving the store when Aunt Mattie saw some plaid dresses that were just what she had been looking for. "What beauties! And how cheap!" she exclaimed. "How I wish I had seen these before. Do you suppose they would mind exchanging the other dresses for these?" "I wouldn't give them that trouble," said Mrs. West. "And the others are so pretty. This is my ideal of what a dress should be for a young child," said Aunt Mattie, as she fingered the frock. "It is well covered, and yet gay. Don't you think it is a beauty?" "It is certainly well covered and gay, and will be most useful," said Mrs. West heartily. She was tired of criticizing, and since the price was so low, the frock could do no harm. Besides, it was the truth. Since she had been so hard to please all morning, Aunt Mattie was delighted to find something that met with Mrs. West's approval. She liked, for shame, to give Evelyn a present, so when Mrs. West went across to another part of the store to buy games to send up to the children, Aunt Mattie quietly bought the plaid frock. She meant it to be a surprise, a great surprise, for Evelyn, her little girl. And she had her wish. It was a great surprise. She saved it to give as a present the night before she was to go home. "Children," said Aunt Mattie, "I'm going away so early tomorrow morning that I'll give you your presents tonight. I'll give Jim his first, because he's the oldest." Jim's present was a sailor suit, just like the one she had bought for his cousin Harry. And since Mrs. West had chosen the one for Harry, it was all a boy could wish. "Thank you very much, Aunt Mattie. I like it. It's a corker." "I know a corker is all right," said Aunt Mattie, frowning slightly. "But it does sound terrible." "Evelyn, I know it's your bedtime," she went on, "but I want you to have your present first." Evelyn eagerly took the dress out of its box. But her face fell when she saw it, for she did not like plaid frocks. Still, she said nothing. "Evelyn," said Mrs. West, trying to hide her own disappointment, "thank Aunt Mattie for giving you such a nice present." Evelyn remained silent. "Darling child," her mother persisted, "kiss Aunt Mattie good night, for it's your bedtime, and say goodbye to her, since she'll be gone before you're up in the morning. And thank her for the nice dress." "It is not a nice dress," said Evelyn. "I hate it." "My dear child, you must not be so rude to Aunt Mattie. I can't let you go to bed until you've told her you are sorry you spoke so." "I'm not sorry," said Evelyn. "I'll sit up all night if I have to, but I'm not sorry." "It will be a most useful frock," said Mrs. West soothingly. "It's just a matter of taste." "Prue is always crazy over plaids," said Aunt Mattie. "Evelyn will like it once she begins to wear it." "I'm not going to wear it, for I hate it." "You can take it to Prue," said Evelyn fiercely. "My dear child," said her mother helplessly, "I can't think why you are so naughty. Kiss Aunt Mattie and tell her you're sorry you spoke so. I'll sit up all night if I have to, but I'm not sorry." "What would you do with a child like that, Mrs. West?" asked Aunt Hilda. But before Aunt Hilda could reply, Aunt Mattie interjected sharply, "If she were mine, I'd use the good old mid-Victorian method of punishment and give her a sound spanking." Evelyn looked around the room. No one seemed to like her very much just then. Even her dear Aunt Hilda looked grave. But worst of all, her father, usually her greatest ally, looked troubled. She climbed up into his lap, seeking comfort. "No wonder she's such a willful child, when you spoil her so, James," said Aunt Mattie sternly. "My little pigeon," her father said gently, "run and tell Aunt Mattie you're sorry you were such a naughty girl." "But father," she pleaded, "I'm not sorry." It would be a lie. She felt sure her father would understand that. "Put her down, James," said Mrs. West firmly. "She has been a naughty little girl, and she does not deserve to sit in your lap. She can sit in the corner in her own little chair and not speak until she is ready to say she's sorry." So Evelyn was placed in her small chair in the corner. Everyone else went on with the evening as if she weren't there. No one looked at her or spoke to her. After a while, her mother said, "Jim, it's your bedtime." And to show how good he could be, Jim went straight over to Aunt Mattie and kissed her goodnight. This was quite a thing for Jim to do. He didn't like being kissed, but he felt sorry for Aunt Mattie. He paused on his way upstairs and came over to Evelyn, who was trying very hard to keep her eyes open. Poor Jim was afraid his little sister really would sit up all night. He bent down and whispered, "Tell her you're sorry. Be a good kid. She's an old lady, and she meant to be kind. You can do it in 3 words, I am sorry." "But I'm not sorry," whispered Evelyn. "Well," said Jim, shaking his head, "if you don't beat the Dutch." And off he went upstairs. "Really, say I am sorry to Aunt Mattie," urged her mother a little later. But I plan to go up early tonight, I haven't finished my packing. Go up whenever you like, Aunt Mattie, said Mrs. West wearily. Evelyn can see you in your room. Oh, of course, I don't mean to go just yet, it's only 8:30. Evelyn had always dreamed of staying up late like the grown-ups. But now that she was actually doing it, she found it very dull indeed. Her mother sat slowly knitting a sweater. Aunt Mattie, as usual, commented on how much faster she could knit if she would only learn the continental method. Toronto was making a helmet, and her father was reading aloud from a very boring book. Evelyn had never felt so sleepy in her entire life. She wondered what would happen if she just went to sleep. Her father's voice seemed to drift farther and farther away, until the next thing she knew, she was in his arms being carried upstairs. Aunt Hilda was coming up the stairs behind them. Evelyn, she said softly, your mother said I could put you to bed tonight. Aunt Hilda's voice was so kind that the tired little girl threw her arms around her neck. I love you very much, said Aunt Hilda gently, even when you're naughty. And tonight, you were a little bit naughty. Evelyn said nothing. Aunt Mattie wanted to do you a kindness, Aunt Hilda went on. She picked out what seemed to her the prettiest dress she could find. Suppose you wanted to make a little girl very happy, and you gave her your doll Sarah. I know Sarah is your favorite. I couldn't, Evelyn said quickly. She's my favorite. I know, said Aunt Hilda. But we're only pretending. Suppose you did. And suppose the little girl said, I hate her. She's only an ugly rag doll. How would you feel? I'd feel horrid, Evelyn admitted. Sarah is such a darling. Well, said Aunt Hilda gently, as your mother said, tastes differ. Now, if you can love a rag doll even when she's old and torn, don't you think you could try to like a brand new dress when Aunt Mattie meant it as a gift from the heart? No, I don't, said Evelyn honestly. Perhaps you couldn't think it pretty, Aunt Hilda conceded. But you could feel kindly toward Aunt Mattie, who only meant to be kind. I know you're fond of her. Not fond like I am of you and Mother, Evelyn admitted. Well, dear, said Aunt Hilda with a smile, Aunt Mattie is the salt of the earth. I love her very much, and I hate to see her hurt. Is she unhappy? Evelyn asked, surprised. Yes, said Aunt Hilda. You made her feel very badly. Now, if I were a little girl, and I'd been given a frock I didn't like, and I knew I had hurt my aunt's feelings, I don't think I could fall asleep until I had made things right. I couldn't say I liked the frock if I didn't, Evelyn said. But I would want to run right into her room and kiss her goodbye and ask her to forgive me for the way I spoke. I'll come with you if that would make it easier, said Aunt Hilda. Evelyn shook her head. I'd rather go by my own self, she said quietly. Aunt Mattie had just finished packing the last things into her trunk and was struggling to get the lid closed. Far more had gone in than had come out, and she looked hot and very tired. She hadn't pulled down the curtain that covered the window overlooking the garden, there was no one on that side of the house to look in, and the night was still and fair. It was very beautiful. The silver moon hung far off in the sky, and the leaves on the oak tree showed almost as clearly as if it were day. They were always the last leaves to come out in spring, but now they were nearly full grown. Something in the peace of that moment, in the soft beauty of the night, and perhaps in Aunt Hilda's gentle words, made the little girl feel a sudden wish to be good. Goodbye, Aunt Mattie, she said softly. I'm sorry I was such a naughty girl. That's a good girl, said Aunt Mattie, giving her a warm kiss. I know you'll like the pretty plaid dress once you begin to wear it. Evelyn pressed her lips tightly together until she had left the room. Then she whispered to herself, I shall always hate it. End of chapter 4.